Week 6 Fantasy Football Factory. We got the King of the South, MINTZY. We got Moody on the sticks. I'm Stephen CHEAH. And as always, we are presented by DraftKings. Football fans, you want to up your game day experience? My partners at DraftKings have a brand new way to play with the Pick 6 app. All new customers who play just $5 are going to get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Super easy. You just pick at least 2 players and choose if they'll have more or less for a certain stat, like more or less than 28.5 receiving yards, more or less than half an interception, more or less than 1.5 passing touchdowns. Lock them in and compete against others for huge cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now. Use code FACTORY, FACTORY, only at the DraftKings Pick 6 app. The crown is yours. MINTZY, huge weekend in the NFL. We're taping this Wednesday morning. Some big things happening. Obviously, Derek Carr injured. We'll talk about what that means. But the headliner has to be Nico Collins. So he just went on injured reserve, out 4 weeks. How do you feel about Texans moving forward? We got C.J. Stroud obviously impacted by this. But then we got another battle at wide receiver. We got Stephon Diggs, who's kind of emerged, had a couple of revenge games in the past 2 weeks against Minnesota and Buffalo. And then Tank Dell, who is back healthy. Dalton Schultz, obviously, a tight end. Who do you feel in this kind of Texans lineup moving forward?
Tank Dell specifically. And you saw it in the game. We were watching the Cave on Sunday. And it's like when Nico's in there, he's not even part of the game plan. And all of a sudden, right when Nico got hurt, all of a sudden he's getting targets and target share. And Diggs' price is going to be higher, and he's like the natural number one that people were to think. But I think Tank Dell is the one I immediately upgrade in this situation.
Yeah, I would agree in that. Diggs has been like pretty hot and cold. Like we've seen him have good games against Buffalo and Minnesota. But in fairness, like I feel like we would see him have better games against his former teams just because the side-eye to Josh Allen was all time. But I feel like he would be part of the game plan just so he is made to feel more at home in Houston. I think moving forward without Nico Collins, I think you're right. I think Tank Dell's going to be the guy we're going to see the biggest boom in value for. But it'll be interesting because Nico Collins was, top 3 wide receiver as far as fantasy, and being out 4 weeks is a huge blow.
Yeah, and another thing, if you're a Nico Collins owner, the Houston is 4-1, and the rest of that division looks like crap. So they're not going to be in a hurry to bring him back if they're leading the division easily. They're going to try to be really, really careful with him because when you look at what's going on in Jacksonville, Indy, and Tennessee, they've got such a cushion and a lead already. So there's not going to be that same sense of urgency to get him back on the field. They're going to worry about getting him healthy for the playoffs, which is probably not the best thing for fantasy owners in this situation. It also downgrades C.J. Stroud a little bit. It's been weird. Houston, they're winning, but the offense hasn't, come really that untracked yet for what was expected. They've kind of been winning lower scoring games, to be honest.
Yeah. But, I mean, Houston, assuming full health, has to be – I mean, I don't think you want to put them as favorites over the Chiefs, but they're going to be one of the teams to be reckoned with for potentially home field and, in the AFC playoffs. But we touched on it to start. Derek Carr looks like reports are going to be he's going to miss potentially multiple weeks with this oblique injury. How are you feeling about the Saints moving forward? Is Spencer Rattler going to be the guy? How do you feel about them from a fantasy and fan perspective?
Okay, from a fantasy fan perspective, so they put Jake Haener in, the Fresno State second-year guy on Monday night, but it looks like they haven't announced it yet, but I think it's going to be Rattler on Sunday. I'm going Saints-Bucks in the Dome Sunday. Rattler's going to be all over the place. Look, the thing about him, like Haener would be more of a guy that you want to do like a Simi and Andy Dalton. Just don't screw it up. Don't turn over. You're not going to be pushing the ball down the field. It's going to be more vanilla. Rattler will be all over the place. He'll run a little bit. He'll push the ball down the field, and he'll probably turn the ball over a lot. But he's better for a fantasy perspective easily if you have Saints because he'll actually try to bomb it to Shaheed and Olave, and maybe they're going to downgrade their value. It's definitely going to hurt not having Carr, but it'll be a lot better if Rattler's in there than Haener, because I think if Haener's in there, you're just really looking at like a grinded out, just try to win ugly situation,
which is going to be tough against the Bucks defense, who's pretty stout against the run for the most part, especially with Vita Vea. I am interested to see, obviously that's a huge NFC South divisional game. This past weekend we were watching the games together. Probably the most entertaining game of the day was the AFC North battle. You hit a big or almost hit a giant prop, but you still cashed pretty nicely in the Ravens versus Bengals game. Points galore. two-part question here. Points, are they back? The first 4 weeks of the season, we saw a big dip in points. Is that attributed to, guys missing camp, limited to reps in preseason, that type of thing? Do you think we're going to see kind of a boon in scoring moving forward?
I think it's kind of back. I think a lot of it is what you said. Beginning of the year, they've gotten where preseason's shorter. They have less, mandatory stuff in the offseason. And I think it takes a few weeks for offenses to heat up and get in a rhythm. And, you mentioned the Bengals are the biggest example of it. I mean, they start so slow every year. It's like it's every year with them.
Yeah.
But Burrow and Chase have been on fire the last 3 weeks. I think we saw Detroit's offense was a little slow early in the year, and then we saw them wake up huge on that Monday night game a couple weeks ago. But I kind of think the scoring's back. I mean, I don't know to the level that it was because defenses are running that too high look to protect themselves over the top a lot.
Yep.
And so what you're seeing is they're making teams run the ball and grind out longer drives, and you're not seeing as many over the top huge plays. But I think it's coming around as the season gets going. And I also think as the year wears on, injuries affect everything, but defense is getting banged up. It doesn't help it. I know that's a two-way street with offenses too, but you start seeing bodies dropping.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically about scoring being back because, the classic DFS version that we're going to play, it's just the Sunday game. So it's not the London game. It's not the evening game. But in that slate, we've got 5 games at a point total of 47.5 at higher. 2 of them at 52.5 with Washington at Baltimore, which should be a super fun matchup. The 2 most highest priced DFS quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels, going head-to-head in that. And then Detroit at Dallas. So what is going to be your must-watch game of Sunday? Point totals just
Well, I mean, you just said both of them. I mean, Washington and Baltimore, especially with that Beltway, you know, they never play, but that area, that's so much fun for the fan bases in those areas. And maybe one of the most fascinating quarterback matchups I can remember in a long time, Lamar Jackson and Jaden Daniels. I mean, this Jaden Daniels thing, we were on it beginning of the year, which I love seeing for the pod. I didn't necessarily say he was going to be the front runner to win an NFL MVP after 5 weeks, but we did love him in fantasy. He's been unbelievable. I mean, they score mid-30s every week, and then you saw Lamar and the Ravens. They've just really blown up the last couple of weeks. This one's going to be fascinating. They tried to flex it to Sunday night, and CBS blocked it. Yes. Wouldn't let them. And then the Lions-Dallas game is a 325 game, another over-under 52.5. They actually played last year in December on that Saturday night game. It was very controversial. And it was only 20-19, but a lot of points are left out on the field. And I think this will be wild high scoring as well. So to me, those are the most fascinating 2 matchups this week.
Yeah, that was the offensive lineman not reporting, but maybe reporting. Very controversial.
And then Detroit went for 2, like 5 different times on that play.
Yeah. So we just talked about the 2 most expensive quarterbacks. Let's get into that. Quarterbacks. I don't know if I told you, I had a good week last week.
Yeah.
Cashed. I used my same lineup for the AWL League. I put it in 2 other entries. Those 2 cashed. I think I just missed the cash in the AWL League, but a fun week nonetheless. I had Flacco. I had Tucker Kraft. I had Mike Pittman.
The Tucker Kraft one.
Yeah.
I mean, he caught like a 60-yard pass.
He is, so his prop, I took a look at it last week. Longest catch, 17. It started 16.5. It moved to 17.5. He had a catch of 17+ yards in his first 4 games. He was facing a Rams team that gave up, I think, the highest or second highest yards per catch to tight ends. I looked at all of his targets for the first 4 weeks, and not only did he get deep balls, but they would also run a lot of screens to him, and he just has incredible tackle breaking ability. So he might be a guy that I ride almost weekly on the long catch, because he doesn't get a ton of targets, but the ones that he gets, he usually takes advantage of. All right, let's talk about the quarterbacks for this coming week. Top of the market, the MVP, Lamar Jackson, $7,800. It falls off quite a bit after that. Jaden Daniels is number 2, $7,300. We got Jalen Hurts coming off a bye, $7,200. C.J. Stroud going to be without Nico Collins, $7,000. Kyler Murray, $6,800. Dak, $6,700. Jordan Love, $6,600. Baker, $6,500. Goes all the way down to Will Levis, $4,800. Jake Haener, $4,800 as well. Who is a guy you like in this quarterback market this week?
Okay, I've got two. Dak Prescott, 6,700. You've been saying it forever. So there's a thing with these Cowboys games, and I've been following this gambling-wise. It's always shootouts. These games in Jerry World always fly over the number, and then on the road, their totals are inflated, and they're playing these like 2017 games on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But when Dak's at home, and this matchup against Detroit, this one should be up and down the field, and 6,700 is a good value. What's the stat? He's thrown for at least 250 yards at home. How many games in a row?
He has thrown for at least 255 passing yards or more in 13 straight home games. His average in that time, 321.3 yards per game, which is a staggering number. I believe his number is like 262 and a half this week as far as passing yards, or that should be right around there. So an interesting one for sure. And the Lions actually give the 5th most passing yards to opposing quarterbacks, 276 yards a game. So I feel like Dak passing yards should be a solid bet. Yeah, so Dak was one of them, and then I also like Kirk Cousins if you're going a little cheaper. The thing is, Cousins may be very highly owned this week after he just went nuclear, throwing for almost 500 yards in that Thursday night game. So that's the only thing that makes me hesitate on him, is that I feel like a lot of people are going to be on that. Yep. And the game's in Carolina, but dude, Carolina's defense is horrible. Very bad. You saw what the Bears did to them. The Bears' offense hadn't looked like that all year. And then you saw the Bengals torched them. The Saints torched them for 47 week 1. Yep. So I think there's a lot of merit this week, and maybe Atlanta stacks, and then possibly Dallas or Detroit stacks. Yep. The Panthers they're tied for the most passing touchdowns given up. They've given up at least 2 passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks in every game this season. A couple that stood out to me, you can't say Lamar Jackson stands out at 7,800. That game 52.5 is going to be very interesting. I do think they run the ball a bit more. I hate to say it, but I kind of like Jaden Daniels here, $7,300. I know it's very expensive, but he's getting a Ravens team that gives up the most passing yards per game in the NFL. The reason they do this, typically, they are usually going to have a lead. Like Dak got a ton of garbage time passing yards against them when they played, just because they were down by 1 million points at the check it. Baltimore has a very, very good run defense. I think they're a top 3 run defense against opposing running backs. So you're kind of forced to pass in that situation. The Ravens also give up the 6th most passing touchdowns per game and the 11th most rushing touchdowns by opposing quarterbacks. They're basically giving up 2 touchdowns a game to opposing quarterbacks. So I like that certainly quite a lot for Jaden Daniels, who is at $7,300. But yeah, as far as Lamar, he does get a Commanders team giving up the most passing touchdowns in the NFL, tied with Carolina, 2.2. That's interesting. And then Kyler Murray, not a bad one. This is a high-scoring projected game. Arizona at Green Bay, 49.5. Not one to overlook. Kyler Murray gets a Packers D that gives it the 8th most passing yards a game and tied for the 6th most passing touchdowns per game. So I look at Kyler and Jaden Daniels if you want to get a little bit more expensive, $500 difference between the two. I think this could be a little bit tougher week if I was going to go absolute bargain shopping. I don't hate Will Levis coming off a bye at $4,800.
Colts pass defense is bad. You saw it last week.
Yep. Moody, who do you got this week in the quarterback land?
So, I've been bargain shopping most weeks. It will not be this week. I'm staying away from the bargain shopping. I think all the value is at the top. But I'm actually going to go with a quarterback that's in that Green Bay-Arizona matchup that's not Kyler Murray. It's Jordan Love. He's thrown multiple touchdowns in all 3 starts this season. He's going against a bottom 5 defense for scoring, an offense in Arizona that should be competent throughout the game and keep this close late into the game. My only concern with Jordan Love is that he's been throwing interceptions. He's already thrown 5 in 3 games this season. So that's my only concern with him. We saw Tucker Kraft this past week step up. Jordan Love feels like he's starting to gain momentum, kind of like he did last year. It was around, week 7 or 8 when the tide started to turn and he started to play really good football. I think we could start to see that process happen again, where he takes care of the ball, they move it efficiently and effectively. I really like Jordan Love this week. He's coming in slightly cheaper than those other guys. He is $6,600. I think he presents good value. I like Jordan Love at $6,600.
Okay, I like that. Mincy, who do you got in the running back market this week?
So I kind of mentioned it. I'm going against Carolina pretty hard here. I think Bijan Robinson's really due like a big breakout. I know the Algiers kind of been getting some of the carries, and that's been annoying people. But man, I saw what DeAndre Swift did last week against Carolina. And everything I've seen out of this Panthers defense, they're horrible. I also think Atlanta kind of likely to be balanced on the road here a little bit. And so I'm going to go Bijan. His price is down to 6,600. He's kind of come down.
It's lower than I would have thought.
Yeah, it's gone down a little bit. So I'm going to roll with him at 6,600 as my RB1 this week.
Yeah. I hate to do it again, but I do like a top-of-the-market guy, Derrick Henry, $8,000. He certainly going against a Commanders D that gives the 7th most rushing yards a game, 116.2, but the highest yards per carry to opposing running backs. And if we know Baltimore, they're going to pound the rock. I think Derrick Henry, second highest on the market, 8,000. Saquon the highest at 8,200. It is actually decent value this week. But if you are bargain shopping, Bijan did stand out to me at a lower price than I would have expected, 6,600. Tyler Algier, I don't think is a bad option as well. You mentioned it as far as the Panthers D. They have the 3rd most rushing yards a game, 120.6 to opposing running backs, but also 2 touchdowns a game to opposing running backs. That is super, super valuable. But then one other I'd point out, and it kind of depends on your flavor here. Tony Pollard, who I've mentioned a couple times on this show, $6,000. If you want to be a little bit cheaper, I think Tajay Spears, who I think had like 15 carries in their last game, $5,100. They get a Colts team that give the 4th most rushing yards a game and also the 7th most catches to opposing running backs, 7. I think this could be a Tajay Spears game. I think he represents good value at $5,100. Moody, who you got?
So next, I've got a couple guys that I'm eyeing in the mid-range. Again, I think we're in a spot where Austin Eckler could have a big week. He's actually looked really freaking good when he's touched the ball. He had 6 carries for 67 yards last week. I mean, he's obviously a guy that we know can catch the ball out of the backfield. Brian Robinson Jr. is just as good, but it feels like this is a spot where Eckler could really start to emerge. We know it's going to be a high-scoring game. One thing Baltimore does very well is shut you down at the line of scrimmage with the run. So I think we could see a lot of Eckler, a lot of short passing stuff to kind of deal with that pass rush of Baltimore. I like Austin Eckler coming in this week. He's averaging about 12 fantasy points per week. I think he could have a pop-off game, get a touchdown as well. At 5,600, Eckler is someone I am looking at. And then obviously I kind of agreed with Mintz on the Bijan Robinson thing. He's due for a game. This feels like a great spot against Carolina. Atlanta could beat their ass. I think Bijan does have value as well. But for me, I think my favorite play this week is, as far as the value is concerned, is Austin Eckler.
The Ravens give up the 11th most receiving yards to opposing running backs. That's kind of where Austin Eckler typically does most of his damage. I also love his receiving lines. I haven't seen them yet, but last week was at 14.5. Like, honestly, anything below 20, I'm gonna bet for Austin Eckler receiving.
Yeah, and you got to think too, the Ravens are going to try to show some exotic looks and come after Jaden. With him being a rookie on the road in this kind of game, they're going to be fired up this week, and so there could be a lot of check down spots that could be good for Eckler.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the receivers and this points per reception DFS league. So top of the market, CeeDee Lamb. No surprise with that game being 52.5. $8,600. We got Amon-Ra St. Brown, same game, $8,100. A.J. Brown, who is questionable right now, $7,800. Stephon Diggs, $7,400. Mike Evans, $73. Jaden Reed, $7,000 is interesting. He's been performing quite well. It goes all the way down to like the $4,000 range. But Mintzy, who stands out to you in this?
I know it's crazy because it's so expensive, but I talked about the Dak thing, and man, I'm paying the CeeDee Lamb here. I'm going to go bargain shop in another spots. I just don't see how this isn't a high scoring game. You mentioned the Dak stat at home. They're going to be chunking it. Detroit allows a lot of yards through the air, and CeeDee Lamb, this is full point PPR. I mean, he just gets his target shares just so big that I feel like his floor is so high. I kind of like a Dak CeeDee Lamb stack here this week.
Yeah, I could see that. A couple that stand out to me. I kind of like the mid-range guys this week. So Zay Flowers and Terry McLaurin. Zay at $6,500. Terry McLaurin at $6,400. They're obviously going to be playing the same game, the 52.5 total point game. So McLaurin gets a Ravens team, gives it the 4th most yards to opposing wide receivers at 193.6, and Zay Flowers gets Commanders team that gives it the 11th most yards to opposing receivers at 158. but also the most touchdowns to opposing wide receivers at 2 per game. So those guys I'm kind of targeting in the middle value. And then also, you mentioned it with the other high points total game. Jameson Williams
I got him too.
for the Lions, $5,800. That just seems like a great value for a guy that, if he gets a touch, it's usually going to be a pretty deep touch. So Jameson Williams, $5,800.
I've got one other bargain one that I think has been worth riding all year so far, and that's Darnell Mooney. Cousins, it really seems like, I know they both had big games last week, him in London, because Cousins threw for 500 yards, but Mooney's target share is big in that offense. And the thing about Mooney, he gets a lot of 20 to 25 yard chunk plays.
Yep.
He's averaging a lot of yards per catch. And having London on the other side and a running game, nobody's keying on him. And Cousins is in a good rhythm with him. And so, Carolina's defense is bad. And 5,300 is still too cheap for him, in my opinion.
Shout out my buddy Darnell Mooney's agent, AJ Stevens. How we doing? Who we got for receivers, Moody?
Well, you actually brought up a couple of my guys. Terry McLaurin and Zay Flowers are two that I like as well, CHEAH. I think there's a ton of optimism there. And I'm also going to point out a guy that's on your favorite team. It's Chris Godwin. Because the Saints take away Mike Evans. Lattimore and Evans, they've had this battle for years. It's one of the best battles in all of football. And Chris Godwin is the guy that gets turned to. And he's been one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL to this point. He's a double-digit play every single week. I love what we've seen from Chris Godwin week in and week out. He's coming in at 6,900. I think the Saints take away Evans, and I think Godwin's just going to have to be there for Baker Mayfield. And by the way, shout out to Baker Mayfield. He has exceeded my expectations this season and is playing damn good football. I'm excited to see them play the Saints on Sunday.
Then we get the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson just diving at knees.
And I also want to point out Ray McLeod. Mintz mentioned Darnell Mooney. McLeod's coming in at 4,300 for the Falcons. He has started every single snap. For the last 4 weeks. He's playing nearly every snap. He's out there. He is locked in as the number 3. He had 9 targets last week, caught 6 of those. He's a guy that in PPR leagues at 4,300. I think Ray McLeod does have a bit of value. If I'm bargain shopping, that might be where I go.
Okay. All right, tight end market. We start with Brock Bowers, top of the market, $6,000. Trey McBride, $5,700. Sam Laporta, $5,500. Dallas Goedert, who's been awesome this year, $5,200. Jake Ferguson, $5,000. We can go all the way down to $2,800, even below that. Mincy, who's someone that stands out to you in the tight end market?
I was debating. Look, you started the Tucker Kraft bandwagon, so I don't want to just completely steal your thunder on it.
I think he's appropriately priced right now.
Yeah, but I like him. I think that's going to be a higher scoring game. I also look for one angle in this Arizona-Green Bay game. I'm looking at that Arizona game in San Francisco last week that they pulled out. That was a 102-degree game. I think Arizona could be hung over this week after that physical division win against a rival, and they may not come out as ready to play off that. I think there could be a little bit of a hangover. It was a huge win for them, but, man, that was kind of one of those wars you get through that might even linger into the next week.
Okay.
And I like Kraft. It's just Kyle Pitts, 4,400, kind of tempting, but he's just so hit and miss every week. You just you don't know what you're getting. So I'm leaning Kraft 4,800. I looked at Pitts at 4,400 as well. Were kind of the two options I was looking at.
Okay. There were two that I like. So Zach Ertz, $3,700. He gets a Ravens team giving up the second most yards to opposing tight ends. We talked about how they just give up a ton of yards because they're usually the other team is usually down and has to throw. And then in our game, Bucs Saints, Cade Otton, $3,500. He's been pretty good the past couple weeks. And he gets a Saints team that gives the third most yards to opposing tight ends at 64.2. Keep an eye on the injury statuses with that one. That would be a late play. I usually don't put these until Saturday night anyway, but this would be a late decision for me. If Jalen McMillan is out, if Trey Palmer is out, then Cade Otton is the legitimate third option. Sterling Shepard showed, last Thursday night he wasn't really ready to be the guy. So Cade Otton just absorbed all those targets and becomes basically a wide receiver 3. I think Cade Otton has big potential if those guys are right. If those guys play, I would temper my expectations for Cade Otton.
One thing to back up the Cade Otton thing in a positive way for you, the Saints are really struggling against tight end right now. Yep. I mean, you saw Dallas Goedert at 170. Kelsey went nuclear on Monday night. The Saints are struggling a lot to cover the tight end.
Yep.
So.
Third most yards to opposing tight ends in the NFL right now.
Yeah, I agree. That's good. Moody's up.
Moody, who you got for tight ends?
I'm looking at another tight end in that game that we don't know if he's going to play yet. It's Taysom Hill. The Saints are willing to use Taysom Hill in every way imaginable on the football field. He's only $4,000. That's $2,000 cheaper than Bowers at the top of the market. And Bowers doesn't play quarterback and running back. Like, none of these other guys do that. It's only freaking Taysom Hill. The last time he was in the lineup, he scored 2 touchdowns before we could even blink, and then he got hurt and came out of the game. The Saints are willing to use him at the goal line. He'll be the water boy as well. I love Taysom Hill at $4,000 if he plays, and I think he's got to play in this game. This is a spot for the Saints where if he is even close to going, he needs to be on the field. Saints need to beat the Bucs. I think Taysom Hill does play, and if he's in the lineup, he'll be in my lineup.
He hasn't yet, but he has lined up in the backfield, and I will bet this. I will hammer the over this year on Brock Bowers over half a carry. He's going to get a carry this year. I'm certain of it.
I could see that. I could see it.
The Taysom Hill thing, I think, one point to back Moody up on this, the Saints are in such a bad quarterback situation this week, and this is a total must-win. They're 2-3. A loss here, you're 2-4 with head-to-head losses against Tampa, Atlanta. The season's going sideways.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying about that is, I mean, could Taysom Hill get some quarterback snaps near the goal line? You know, this is an empty the kitchen sink situation on Sunday, and especially with Rattler or Hainer going. You know, that's the only concern, though, is just that, you know, the quarterback situation, how many points can they score?
Yep. All right, let's move on to the defense special teams market. Top of the market is Pittsburgh going against a Devontae Adams-less Raiders team. $3,700. Texans $3,600. Falcons $35. Eagles $34. We go all the way down. The cheapest is the Carolina Panthers against Atlanta, $2,400, and the Patriots $2,400. Mintzy, who do you got?
Man, I just went bargain shopping, but I think they got to show up. I went Saints $2,700 because Baker, as good as Baker Mayfield is, and I do think he's really good, he still turns the ball over a little bit. There's always a throw or two a game that could get picked. He's a little high on that, and I think you're gonna see a really, really big Saints defensive effort in this game because everybody knows it's at stake in this game. I think it's gonna be a lower scoring game. I think the total's like 42 or 43, but I think after what happened Monday night when KC almost had 500 yards and with everything that's at stake in this game, the Saints are going to play hard on D and maybe create a turnover too.
I guess you're not a big believer in the rest advantage because the Bucs have a giant rest advantage coming off a Thursday night game facing a Saints team that was on the road late Monday in a loss, obviously losing their quarterback. The Bucs are a defense I'm considering at $2,600.
I mean, I like against the quarterback situation. I definitely understand.
Yes, the Falcons also $3,500. I don't know if we've overinflated Andy Dalton. He's been playing fine football for sure, but the Falcons have a very good defense. I know they did let up 30 points last week to the Bucs, but they have playmakers all over their defense. $3,500, and then the Eagles going against Deshaun Watson. Kevin Stefanski was adamant there's not going to be a quarterback change. If you get a chance to play Deshaun Watson, I think that's absolutely worth a look there. $3,400. Moody, who you got? Who stands out to you on the defense special teams area?
So I've had Denver as my defense 3 of the first 5 weeks, and I'm probably just going to roll with the Broncos once again. This is one of the projected lowest scoring games of the week. This Denver defense is so much better than people realize. I mean, they're good at every level, and they weren't supposed to be necessarily, but they are finding ways. I think they deserve a ton of credit for what they've done to this point. They're 3-2, and I mean, they're a better football team than people want to give them credit right now. I think they're going to show up and be pretty good. I don't know if they're going to put up double-digit fantasy points the way they have every to this point. It'll be a solid bet in daily fantasy once again against a Chargers team that while they've played efficient offensive football, they really haven't scored a lot of points. So I like defense once again. This will be the 4th time this season I've had them in my lineup. They've been good to me so far.
I've got one more wide receiver I forgot to mention because I got to give him a shout-out, too, because it was so epic what he did Sunday. Tolbert at $5,000 for the Cowboys. Yeah. So I saw a thing. It was a Don Kleinman who always posts on Twitter.
Don Kleinman, yeah.
Yeah. I saw a thing last week, in the middle of the week, that got me on Tolbert. It was top 10 NFL receivers by separation rate. And it was all the people you'd think. I mean, it's CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and, you know, every big name up there. And Jalen Tolbert was in the middle of it. And I saw it, and I was like, oh. And with Brandon Cooks out, Tolbert is getting in the number 2 role, and that is directly why I hit a huge parlay Sunday night on DraftKings. Shout out DraftKings, the 50% boost. I maxed out Tolbert at 79.5 after I saw that, and I knew with Cooks out he'd get more targets. And with Dak chunking it at home, 5,000 good value. He's the number 2 receiver on that team. He caught, I believe, 6 passes in the game. He caught the game-winning touchdown. He was getting more of a target share, and he could separate. So I think him at 5,000 is worth a look. I think he could have another game too.
Very funny moment on the 3rd and goal. The ball goes to him. It skips in the back of the end zone. He kind of dives for it, hits him right in the ding-dong.
And then he catches the winning touchdown.
So they had to call timeout because he was like kind of hunched over.
And then he goes back in and catches the winning touchdown.
Yeah,
I hit my 67 plus 67.50 parlay.
Huge. All right, Mincy, plant your flag. Who is the one guy that's going to be in every lineup you have this weekend?
I'm going the Bijan Robinson dang. I'm playing Carolina sucks on defense. I think Atlanta's going to try to be balanced on the road. This feels like the breakout game where it gets over 100 and at least 1 touchdown.
Okay, I like that. Moody, who you got for your plant your flag guy?
It's going to be Taysom Hill if he plays. Just no other tight end offers the upside that he has because he gets so many guaranteed touches, it feels like, in the Saints offense. Mintz alluded to it. You know, he could get a lot of quarterback snaps in this game if they go with Haener, if they don't feel comfortable with Rattler. I think there's a chance we see a lot of Taysom Hill taking snaps at quarterback, and no other tight end on the board is going to do that. I love Taysom Hill at $4,000, but he has to be starting. If it's not him, I will probably be looking at Terry McLaurin. He's been in my lineup a lot this season. I'm a big Terry McLaurin supporter, and I love the value you're getting out of him at this point.
So I have one that I haven't spoke about yet. He is going to be in every single one of my lineups. He is, in my opinion, a very good value. He's a wide receiver, $4,400 under cost. His name is Demario Douglas. He plays for the New England Patriots. When I saw Drake May being inserted as the starting quarterback, my antennas raised up because he's got a much better arm than Jacoby Brissett. I think they're going to pass it a little bit more. They're going to have more ability to pass the ball. They're playing a Texans team that gives up the 7th highest yards per catch to opposing wide receivers. So I went in. I took a look at, okay, I thought Jalen Polk was going to be more of the deep threat, but actually Demario Douglas averages more like a higher yards per reception than Jalen Polk. He's also got more targets, more catches. Digging into it further, so Drake May played a little bit against the Jets. He threw 8 passes. Demario Douglas got 3 of those targets, with 37.5% of his targets. He also got 50% of his completions. Two of Drake May's 4 catches or 4 completions were to Demario Douglas. When you look at the yardage, he had 20 of his 22 passing yards. So I think Demario Douglas at $4,400 is a must play in a PPR format like we have with the DraftKings Daily Fantasy lineup. So Demario Douglas is going to be in my lineup every single time this Sunday.
I like it. I like the theory. I think May should throw. You know, I do think the passing should be better with May.
I don't think he's going to throw for 300 yards, but I mean,
No.
if he throws for, 220, and we can get 30% of those to Demario Douglas and maybe a touchdown, but a bunch of catches. That's great value for $4,400. So sign me up for Demario Douglas bargain shopping with the wide receivers.
I like it.
All right, that is it for Week 6.
Join us. Pardon my take. AWOL League. Play against us. AWL League. I don't want to say AWOL. Or you know what I mean. Yeah. Award-winning listeners. Award-winning listeners.
Award-winning listener league, the AWL League. Join us in that for the King of the South, Mincy. For Moody on the Sticks, I am Stephen Shea. Thank you for rocking with Fantasy Football Factory again. Thanks to DraftKings.
Crown is yours, and Tampa. Thinking and praying for you this week.
Yes. Good vibes to all of our friends in Tampa and all of Florida. We're gonna have. We could probably say this at this point. We're gonna have a shirt going on sale where all proceeds are going to Feeding Tampa, which is a food bank in Tampa, for after the hurricane. So anything you can do to help with that, we'll be sure to promote it a lot.
Tampa tough.
I think we're going with Florida strong just because it's happening with a bunch of.
It's Jacksonville and Orlando. Yeah.
So prayers up to everybody in Florida this week. We're thinking of you. Thanks for listening or watching. See you guys.